everybody, and welcome back to the DevMarketer channel. I'm your host, J.A. Curtis, but you guys know that you can call me Alex. I still don't have my face cam set up. Again, I'm on a Macintosh that has macOS Sierra, and unfortunately, my screencasting software just doesn't work yet, so I'm using good old QuickTime to try to record this. But today's video is going to be the start of a little mini series. It's not a big deal. We're not really procrastinating other things. But what I want to go over is Laravel 5.3 new features, okay? So this video is going to be part number 1 of the series. There's going to be 13 parts. You can see the parts over on DevMarketer.io. I'm going to link this down in the description. Over there on our website, you can see all the parts that we're going to be going over. Down here, way at the bottom, right here at the bottom, these are all the parts that we're going to go over. So today we're going to start with part number 1. There's going to be a video for each of these series, and for those of you guys that might feel like I'm going too fast or something like that, it's all written down. Every single video has a page associated with it, okay? So these are all the things that we're going to be going over in this video, and it's all written down on devmarketer.io. Okay, so with Laravel 5.3 coming out, Laravel 5.3 is going to come out next week. So if you're watching this as soon as the video goes live, it's coming out in 2 or 3 days. So it is ready to come out, and I've been playing with it now for a couple weeks on a few personal projects, and it's been great. So with it so close to come out, it's time to go over all the features that are coming to Laravel 5.3 so that you can stay up to speed with what has changed and what you can take advantage of now that we couldn't take advantage of before. You can see basically, just because this is the start of the series, I'll kind of go over some of the highlights here of what we'll be going over, and then we're going to dive into the first video, which is all of the small changes, all the little things in the video that changed in Laravel that I can't quite make a full video about, or I could, but it'd just be like a 1-minute video. So we're going to go over all those in this video, and this will be the longest of all the videos probably. The next videos will be a lot shorter because they're focused on one feature at a time. All right, so there's a bunch of small changes which we're going to go over. There obviously are some file changes, directory changes, and stuff like that. That were some folder changes that we'll go over as well in the next video. It's nothing too big, nothing to lose any sleep over. There's some few nice little changes to routing we're going to do. There's a new helper called the cache helper, which makes it really easy to cache items. Pagination's been made a little bit easier. We can now customize pagination templates quite a bit simpler. We'll talk about that in part 5. The pivot table has a new option allowing you to toggle instead of just sync. So if you don't want to check to see if something is synced or not, or if something is on the pivot table or not, you can just toggle it on or off. We'll talk about that in part 6. Next, this is actually really handy because we just did a video about image dimensions or image uploading. And in that video, we had to bring in that image helper library, image intervention, mainly so we could check the dimensions of our image. But now a lot of that's going to be built in. That validation just built into the validation for Laravel. We'll talk about that in part 7. Json support is now available. Those that don't know, in MySQL 5.7, there's a new column type for JSON. So while you could work with JSON before in Laravel 5 and 4 and 5, it just basically would serialize it and put it into a text area, a text column, but now it actually supports the official JSON, and we'll talk about that and some nice little helpers that you get. File uploads are a lot easy. Again, ironic because we just did file uploads in our last video, but file uploads will become a lot easier. So we'll talk about how you can do that. It's going to be super easy. There's an easier way now to manage mail with something they're calling Mailable. We'll talk about that. It makes it super fast and easy to do mail. The good news is what we learned in our last series about mail will still work. They're not editing any of the mail stuff, but there is an easier way to do mail if you want to use it. Otherwise, you can do it the traditional way, like the way I taught you in this last series, and it will continue to work. It's not being depreciated. The Mailable is just an easier way to access all of the mail, just to make it faster. Okay, so we'll talk about that, but don't worry, don't lose any sleep over that. Next is a new notification system called Notifiable. That's going to be a quite long video, probably. There's a lot to go over. That's a really exciting feature. It allows you to easily send notifications to Slack, Slack to text message to anything like that. We'll talk about that quite a bit. And then we're going to talk about searching and building a search index using Laravel Scout. This is one of our really highly requested features, and we're actually going to cover it here in this part 12. And then last but not least, we'll talk about broadcasting with Laravel Echo. A lot of you guys ask how you get like instant notifications like you see on Facebook, you know, like a notification pops up while you're on the site without refreshing. That's through something called broadcasting, and that's something that Laravel Echo will allow us to do. So that'll be a really cool feature as well. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's dive into this video. Let's dive into this episode and go over all of these features. I'm basically going to go straight down the post, and we're going to talk about each of these individually here on the over the stream, and then of course you can follow these up by reading the post. Okay, so first of all, a lot of stuff has actually been happening to Laravel 5.3. This is a really big release. This is almost like a version 6 release. But anyway, it's version 5.3. There's a lot going on. The first one that you may not hear from other people is that PHP 5.6 is now the required version, okay? So the dependencies in Laravel 5.6 are now require, or sorry, in Laravel 5.3 now require PHP 5.6. Okay, so this shouldn't be a problem. You probably ought to be using Laravel. In fact, let me get you a better command line here so you can actually see it. But you ought to have been using probably PHP 7. But a lot of you guys may only have PHP 4 or PHP 5.5. PHP 5.5 or 5.4. That's what a lot of systems have installed, but really you should be using 5.7, or sorry, you should be using PHP 7. But anyway, I want to make sure you guys know about this. You can check if you're inside your terminal, you can type which PHP, and it will tell you, or sorry, not PHP, which PHP. You want to do PHP version, like this, and it will tell you what version of PHP you're using. Okay, so in this case I'm using PHP 7, but you're going to want to double check this and make sure you're at least 5.6, because the default that comes with at least Mac is I think it's 5.5. Okay, so you may have problems installing Laravel 5.3. Okay, so you want to check that and make sure you're using PHP 5.6 or above, and try to shoot for PHP 7, okay? And when we deploy to the internet, you're going to want to be using PHP 7 as well, okay? So with that out of the way, let's also talk about migrations. So migrations has a really cool feature built in now that allows you to, this is, I guess, not a big deal for everybody, but it will be nice for people creating packages. Now when you want to, in the past when you wanted someone to generate a migration for your package so that their database would line up with what your package required, you had to basically do this vendor publish thing and publish. You basically copied a migration file from your package folder into your into the migrations, the actual users migrations folder, and that's kind of the way that we handled it up to this point. But now you can actually load migrations from multiple places. This is going to be great for people developing packages. It allows you to just run migrations, and it's automatically going to pull the migrations that you have from your package without needing to do a vendor publish. Okay, so that's going to be kind of a good thing. I will mention in this video, we've been doing easy tutorials up to this point, and I'm going to be kind of mixing in some of these features for Laravel 5.3 are going to be like super basic level. Some are going to be advanced. Some are going to be intermediate. I'm just going over the features regardless of your skill level, okay? So if you don't understand something, you can take a look and research it a little bit. You can ask questions over here in the comments. You can feel free to ask questions on YouTube or on the blog. But I'm just going to kind of go over all of them regardless of skill level. Okay, so another awesome thing with migrations, and I don't know how many of you guys knew this or didn't know this, but in previous versions of Laravel, when you wanted to do a migration, you could do PHP Artisan migrate reset, which would reset all. Well, let me show you. So what you might be familiar with is rollback, and rollback would set back the last migration that you did. Okay, so let's say you did 10 migrations and you want to undo the last one. You could do my PHP Artisan migrate rollback. It would undo the last migration, and that way you only have the 9 migrations, and then you could run PHP Artisan migrate to re-migrate that last migration again. Okay, so that was kind of a nice feature. There was also reset, which would get rid of all of them and then pull them all the way back up. So it would basically unmigrate everything, migrate everything back up. So that was kind of a nice feature as well. The problem here is, what if you wanted to roll back like 2 or 3 migrations? Not all of them, just like the last couple. And this has happened to me a ton, like seriously a ton. And what I sometimes do is I've sometimes cheated the system. And what I'll do is I'll look in under a table here. And I don't have very many tables, but I would look here under a table and I would basically say, okay, well, I wanted to change this to be null. So then I would change it in my database, and then I would go to my migration and change it, but I wouldn't actually roll the migration. I would just try to keep them in sync because I couldn't afford to roll the migration because it would undo everything that I had added. So this was a problem that we had up till now. We could only reset everything or roll back 1 migration, but we couldn't do like steps, like 2 or 3 or 5 migrations, and now we can. So using PHP Artisan Migrate rollback again, by default it will roll back 1 migration. However, you can actually pass in this steps equals like 3, and it will now roll back the last 3 migrations instead of like just 1 or all of them. So it's really awesome. We now have control over that. By the way, I should mention, those of you guys that don't know how to check on your migrations, if you go into your database, as long as you've ran at least 1 migration, Laravel will create a table called migrations. Every Laravel database will have this because it creates it whenever you type PHP Artisan Migrate. And you can see the batch. Now, granted, I did all these in one batch here, but you can see the batch that it was rolled back in. So if you roll back 1 migration, it would get rid of this. You roll back 2, it basically get rid of all of these. Okay, so these are the batches that they're ran in. So you can always check here. Most people would have like a 1, a 2, a 3, a 3, a 4, a 5, 5. And that's what mine used to look like. But I had the exact same problem that you saw we just talked about. I had where I had to roll back everything and reset it because I couldn't roll back just a couple. Okay, so that's an awesome new feature in Laravel 5.3. So that's going to be really cool. PHP Artisan Migrate rollback, and then you pass in however many steps you want to pass in. Oh, it's only step, by the way. I think I said steps. I put steps, and it's just step. Okay? All right, that's all. Next is Elixir. Elixir 6. We haven't talked much about Elixir on this channel, but I will show you guys if we go. Let me go into a project that has Elixir real quick. And there's a new interface for Elixir. Let me just show you that real quick. So now when you run gulp and you're using Elixir on a project that has Elixir, which this project does, it's going to run your gulp here. And I've got to make this nice and big. But you get this awesome output now. So you get all of your everything that you ran. You can see here how long it took to run and everything like that. And now you get an awesome table that basically says what happened. So this is the task that we passed it in. We told it to mix.sass. This is what it did. It compiled it. It prefixed everything. It concatenated everything. It made the source maps. And then it saved it to the new destination. It pulled it from this file, from my assets.sass, and then threw it into my public CSS app.css. So really, really cool. You get this awesome layout now with Elixir 6, which is really, really cool. Again, you didn't need this, but it's an awesome nice to have. So now in your Laravel 5.3 projects, when you set up Elixir, you should get this, which is going to be awesome. Okay, so that's everything we got for that. I just want to show you guys that. And let's see. I think actually is Sass a new? Sass must be a new. I don't know. That wasn't new. Yeah, it was. I think before you had to do styles actually in Sass. I think you had to do something like this. Styles, Sass. Is what I think you had to do. So now you can just do, when inside of your migration file, you can, inside of your Elixir file, you can actually just do it by itself. So you can see here when I look up my gulp file, you can just do mix.sass and then the name of the file, and it just gets everything all set up. Okay, I think this is what we had to do in the past, was scripts and styles. Okay, so now there's this awesome new Sass helper, which is sweet. Thank you, Jeffrey Wave. He's the one that made Elixir. So you can go ahead and thank him. All right, cool. So that's all for Elixir 6. Next is the new layout. So actually, let's go ahead and create a new project here for Laravel 5.3. And I'll actually show you guys, in case you are interested in creating a new application running Laravel 5.3 before it comes out, what you can do is you can use your normal Laravel new command. We would normally run Laravel new and then like project name, you know, so like we're going to call this Laravel 5.3 is what we'll call this project. Well, what you can do is to get the early release, you can just do --dev and then the project name. And now when you click enter, it's going to create the entire file. It's going to create everything basically using the development. Okay, so there we go. We get everything running, which is awesome. And this is better than cloning. I don't know if you guys know, but git clone, if you do a git clone and you clone, github.com, whatever, /Laravel, you can do this, but the problem with this is that it doesn't actually set up things like your application key, it doesn't generate your application fee, it doesn't set permissions, it doesn't do, there's a bunch of stuff that the installer does that cloning doesn't do for you. So just something to keep in mind. You may be, it might be worth it for you to use the Laravel command if you aren't using it already. Okay, so now that we got that set up, let's go ahead and just run PHP Artisan. Oh, we got a cd into there real quick. So cd Laravel 5.3, and then we're going to do PHP Artisan make auth. That's going to generate our authentication scaffolding. Then we need to, let's open it in Atom real quick and just change the configuration real quick for the database. So we're going to go to, let's see, go to application, go to config. We're going to go to, we just need to go into our env file. And let's go ahead and set up this MySQL here. So let's just change the database to test. And then we're going to change the password to, or the username to root and the password empty. That's all I need for my basic one here. So let's go to SQL Pro and let's click it and let's boot in. Let's make a new database, add database, call it test. Okay, so now we've got an empty database that should match this right here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run our migrations. So PHP Artisan migrate, and it's going to run our migrations, and now we should have our migrations in here. Okay, so what I wanted to show you guys is the default, basically what Laravel will look like by default. Yep, you can see we got our migrations. Okay, so let's head on over to Chrome, and we will need to run a terminal command, PHP Artisan serve, or I guess I could do Laravel. I don't know if I got this working yet. Let's see, Laravel 5.3.dev. Nope, I don't know. I got to look into Valet. I'm not sure what's up with my Valet. Okay, so let's go to localhost. And this is the default now Laravel project. So it's a little bit cleaner, looks nicer. You've got links straight to the documentation to things like GitHub and things like that. And then also you can see up here, you've got your default login and register. And when you click this is kind of the new look of the authentication scaffold. So this is what it looks like, nice and clean. I think it looks great. I think it's definitely a good starting point for a lot of people, and it gets you up and running with something that looks great right out of the box. So that's awesome. That comes in with, that's the new layouts that come with Laravel, which is awesome. Next is dependencies. So dependencies are pulled in now in Laravel 5.3 from package.json. So let's take a look at that. We'll go over here and open up our package.json. And when you take a look at this, you'll see that we have all these dependencies. So we have Bootstrap, Sass, we have jQuery, we've got Vue. We'll talk about Vue in a future video. But anyway, we'll talk about, all that stuff. So all this stuff is pulled in through this package.json. So it's now part of NPM. So you might want to get NPM installed if you haven't already. Anyways, just so you can pull these things in and get them installed through npm. And then you'll notice that inside of it's in our assets, I think, so resource assets, JS, you can see that we've got now our bootstrap.js, which contains basically everything you need to set everything up, okay? So it includes your Bootstrap, Sass, your Vue, and stuff like that, okay? And then over here under app, I think we've got... this is where it actually sets up the initialization for Vue, which we'll talk about, and then pulls in the Bootstrap, okay? So if you're wondering where these files are, where Bootstrap comes in, where jQuery and stuff comes in, it's all inside of this bootstrap.sass, okay? So that's kind of one of the new features that I thought I mentioned. Is this still running? It looks like it's still running. Okay, so I probably shouldn't have ran that, but let's take a look back at our post here. And then down here, we've got some controller changes. So these aren't too big. In fact, I'm not going to really show them on stream. But when you are working on packages now, you can actually just you don't need to extend the controller if you don't need all of the Illuminate routing. Okay. Now for us, for practical purposes, you're still going to need to extend the controller on your traditional controllers. These controllers here, you still need to extend the controller. But if you're writing a package and you don't need all the Illuminate routing functionality, you can actually just create a controller without extending it, which is kind of nice for people creating packages. Okay, so that's going to be a nice change. Oh, and then another change is this invoke method. So now inside of your controller, again, if you're creating a controller that only has maybe one function in it, and it's a complex function, you're not or method, and you're only going to have one method in the entire controller, you can actually now create something called public function double underscore and then invoke. All right, just like this. And then you can run whatever you want inside of here. And this is kind of a great way to just have a single method controller, which a lot of people, it's kind of becoming popular now to have billions of controllers. So this is a way you can kind of follow that popularity. And then inside of your routes file, which we're going to talk about routes in a second, but inside of your routes folder, you actually will have, you can actually just call, in this case, the home controller. And now the home controller will automatically go to the home controller and look for the invoke method, okay? So if you don't pass in any @, nothing after here, it'll look for the invoke method and then call that invoke method, okay? So that's kind of a cool way to have it's almost like a default controller method or something through using this invoke, which is kind of cool. All right, so once again, don't forget about the routes. We're going to talk about routes in the next video, okay? So we're almost done with this one. Let's take a look now. Inline artisan commands. I was going to make a quick artisan command for you guys here. We can now create custom artisan commands, and we can make them inline. So we don't need to create our own class files or anything like that like we used to do. So this is actually really cool. Like we can make one right now in front of everybody here, and it's super easy. Basically what you do is you're going to go to app console, kernel. This is where you would issue your commands. Down here is where you can create new commands. Okay, so you can see here that I created a little command called, we get your name, and then we just say, hey, it's good to meet you. So we can go ahead and set this up. So let's head back over to Adam, and we can do this right now. So we're going to do this command, and this is where we can pass in a command. So we can say, this is like I am, but you can only have one name. So you're going to say, hey, I'm, and then my name. All right, we're going to pass that in. And then you create a function, and you can pass in this parameter here. Okay, so this parameter called name. And we're going to pass that in, and then we can do whatever we want here. So we can pass in a line that says info, and we can just say, good to meet you, and then we're going to pass in the name. All right, so that's just going to say, hey, good to meet you, and then your name. So we can see this now in the terminal. Let's go ahead and kill all of this, and we can down do PHP artisan I'm Alex. Okay, and then you can say, good to meet you, Alex. So we created a little artisan command, super easy like that, just right here in line. And you can do, obviously, you could like perform some functionality is what you would probably do in here. Instead of just talking back to yourself, and then you would use this as a way to talk back to you. So I think you can do, let's see, I think like error or warning. Let's just do this again. Yeah, so good. That's an error message, and then we can also create warning messages. And let's see, is it not warning? It's something else. I don't. There is another alert, maybe. Let's try alert. Otherwise, I'm not gonna. There's documentation for this. It's not worth going into. Alert must not be it. But anyway, you guys get the idea. So we can pass in all this stuff here, and it's just super easy. It's right inside line. And then the nice thing is this shows up immediately. If I do PHP artisan list, it'll show up in my list. Now I can see I have this command right here, the I'm command, and we can do this just right in line like this. In fact, we can even write, we can do describe, and we can say a great way to talk to yourself. All right. And then we go back in here and we do PHP artisan list to see all of our commands. And now up here where we did our I'm command, right here, you can see it's a great way to talk to yourself. So we have this little descriptor in here. Okay, so we can set all this up super inline, super easy. I just think that that's a pretty cool feature, especially when you want to make just a quick command for yourself. This is just a really easy way to just make commands for yourself. I think it's awesome. Okay, so what else do we have? That's basically everything for that. And then the last few things are we have running queue workers. It's a little bit easier now. There's one minor API change that I can show you real quick. So by default, when you ran queue workers in the past, you would have to do something like PHP Artisan queue work. And then when you click this, it would run a worker. Now, I should not have done that because it's running a worker, but it would run the worker one time, basically, okay? And that's what I was thinking was going to happen. That's why I thought it would be okay, but it's not. It would run your worker one time and then, you know, kind of like that. But if you wanted to run it on an ongoing basis, you would have to run --Damien, and then this would actually do an ongoing worker that would just stay running on a Damien cycle. Okay, so now when you run PHP Artisan queue work, though, by default, you get that Damien or daemon, whatever people want to call it. You get that Damien command is just by default. So the default command of PHP Artisan queue work is now the daemon. If you want to run it one time, you can just do --, once, which will run the command just one time, like you might be used to. So anyway, just something to keep in mind. It's a minor change with queue workers. Another nice cool thing with queue workers now is you can do queue work and you can actually set a timeout. Okay, so you can set a timeout for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or whatever you want in seconds. And that way, if the queue worker tries to do something and it doesn't work in 10 seconds, it'll just give up, quit the queue, and then start working again, okay? And then the nice thing is that those commands can still continue to go in the background, but it at least then is able to run other queue workers as well, okay? So it can run other queues. So that'll be really nice. That's another feature. This prevents things from getting stuck because sometimes it's waiting on like an external service, can get kind of stuck sometimes, and then you're just working indefinitely. It's kind of stuck, not doing other work that you would expect it to work because it's waiting on something. So this kind of is a way to just time it out so that it continues on its way. There's actually a lot of stuff apparently that's changed with queue workers, and it's been completely rebuilt under the hood, so it should be way more reliable for any of you guys that rely on that. Okay, next is the firstOrCreate. firstOrCreate, it now accepts custom parameters. You can actually see this here, so I probably won't do it on screen, but I just wanted to explain it to you. So here we're creating a user. We do user firstOrCreate, and what this normally would do is you can pass in a parameter in the old version. You'd basically pass in this, and then you would close it off here. And basically, in this case, we're saying, hey, find someone that has this GitHub ID, okay? We grabbed it basically from GitHub. So we're grabbing their user ID from GitHub. There's a column in our database called GitHub ID. And we're saying basically, hey, find someone who has a GitHub ID equal to this GitHub ID, all right? And if it finds it, then it will return the person who has that GitHub ID. And if it doesn't find it, then it creates a new user with this GitHub ID, which is really cool. However, now what's even more cool is you can now pass in other parameters. So for example, in this case, these parameters are used if it needs to create something, which is really, really cool. Because basically what's going to happen here is if this is a new user and it ends up needing to create it, it'll also grab the avatar basically at this moment and load in the avatar section. Okay, so anyway, I think that that's really cool. It's just this is a more practical way to use firstOrCreate without having if statements underneath, try to see if it actually created it and so forth. So this is a really cool command, and you can read the pull request here and take a look at it. Okay, we are on the last one now, and this is basically just that the query builder now returns collections for everything. So in the past, those of you guys that you might be familiar with when we used, let's see here, let's go to our controller. In the past, when we did something like, you know, user equals user find, right? And we would find it by ID. Of course, I can't do it in here. There's no ID, but you guys get the idea. So when we would do this before, you guys remember that what we would do in the view is we could do things like user ID or user name or user email like this, right? We could handle it because it was a collection object. So we had all this awesome functionality of PHP objects because this was returned as an actual object. Okay, and that's because we used eloquent. Okay, so this is an eloquent command. Obviously, all these things like, you know, user all and stuff like that are all eloquent commands. And whenever you got used an eloquent command, you would get back a object, a collection object. Okay. However, what you may not have known is if you use the database or the query builder, something like DB table, users, where, or find, or whatever, blank, and then you did get. Anyway, you would do something like this, where ID equals ID, get. So whenever you did this type of thing, and this is usually you would use the query builder when you're doing more complex commands and stuff like that. What you would actually get back is an array. Okay, so you would get, then you would have to access it with things like user ID, user email, and stuff like that. Okay, so it was kind of weird how like sometimes you got an object and sometimes you got an array depending on what you were using. And I was never a really big fan of it. To me, I thought it was confusing. It was harder for newer people to learn and stuff like that. But the good news is now, no matter what, you're going to get a collection. So whenever you use the query builder, you're going to get a actual collection back. Okay, so even now in these, in Laravel 5.3, you can just do your normal object type stuff. Okay, so that's a really cool feature. I think that was great. It's a nice little change that makes a big difference. Okay, so that basically wraps up everything I got for you guys in this video. In the next video, we're going to be continuing on and we're going to talk about the directory changes, I believe. Let me just double check. Yes, it's the directory changes and then going into the routing changes. Okay, so be sure to stay tuned. Those of you guys that are just finding me for the first time, welcome to the DevMarketer channel. We talk about basically how you can build and grow your next great idea. So we're all about development, marketing, and everything put together. So please feel free to subscribe and like if you are new to the channel. We'd love to have you on board. And basically that's all I got for you guys in this video. The links for all of this are in the description, and also I'm going to put links for all the videos after they go live, obviously, in the description as well. So if you want to skip to a certain video, just take a look in the description and see if it's available yet. Okay? Thanks a lot, everybody. Once again, this is Alex, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.